Alex, real ass playoff teams. Are there any?
Well, Alabama and Clemson probably are real ass playoff teams, but I think the only basis on which we know that is that it's college football and it's, the 2010s, 2020s, so they are real playoff teams. Other than that, we have no idea. This is all a big mess. There are some teams that I figured would be playoff teams, like Oklahoma, perhaps LSU, but particularly Oklahoma. I have no idea. They still could be. We don't know anything, right?
Yeah, I mean, I could not care less about the playoff usually in September, and particularly now. That's just a bit. It is going to be fun, though, if a Pac-12 team goes 7-0. We'll get to that later. All right, let's whip it around real quick. Mississippi State, the air raid cometh to the SEC. Mississippi State beats LSU 44-34 in Death Valley in the daytime. Proof of concept.
It is proof of concept. I think that as we both know and as the University of Washington Huskies demonstrated for years in the Pac-12, eventually, or even just with one particular opponent, you can be figured out in this scheme and it can lead to very, very bad results that happen repeatedly with nothing changing. But that might take a while and it might not happen at all. And the output for Mississippi State in data point one of the SEC's air raid experiment, at least the post-Hal Mummy SEC air raid experiment, was very strong for Mississippi State. KJ Costello, 36 of 60. He sets the SEC's single-game passing record by a lot at 623 yards and 5 touchdowns. 12 different pass plays longer than 20 yards. Richard, 4 receivers with 6+ catches, 3 with 100+ yards. Mississippi State ran for 49 net yards. That included a loss of 38 on
That's how we draw it up, baby.
But Mike Leach has insisted before, you can win a football game without running the ball. And here it is, working against the champs in their house. I'm impressed because I thought this was going to be a very bad situation for a team with a new head coach installing the air raid. Actually, teaching the air raid takes just a few days in a classroom.
We talked about this earlier in the week.
We did. There are only a couple plays, plus some bells and whistles, but it's mostly your four verts, your Y cross, things that you just have to rep a million times in practice. This is something that Hal Mummy talks a lot, that Mike Leach talks about in The Perfect Pass, one of my favorite books that I strongly recommend. You just need a QB and a receiver to get a feel for each other, exactly when the ball's coming out, where on the hip it's going to land, and it's all very muscle memory based. I figured that in a year without practice, that would not be a good time to move to that offense. I think I focused too much on the repetition thing and not enough on this. If you are going to have a new coach and a new offense in a pandemic with very little practice, it's probably good that you have an offense with like 2 plays. Simplicity is king, and this was a very air-raided game. KJ Costello, 10 yards per throw when he was clean, 10 yards per throw when he was pressured. That's the air raid. You give him outlets. 35 of his 60 throws were out in less than 2.5 seconds. Extremely Mike Leach, extremely air raid, and it worked. And the only evidence we've seen through one game is that it works.
I think if anybody wants some kind of more required reading, but beyond The Perfect Pass on the air raid, go on Fox Sports' college football Twitter account or Fox Sports' Twitter account on their Saturday pregame show that has Urban Meyer on it. Urban Meyer, Graham Harrell, and Matt Leinart did a really, really good sort of, almost taxonomy of college football scheme, and they broke it down. Also, Urban Meyer's disdain for the air raid is actively hilarious.
Palpable.
It's so funny. But yeah, it's a really, really good sort of look at how the air raid works, and why it maybe can work. Now, we talked about months ago when he first got hired, I was like, look, this is going to be the best defense an air raid offense has ever been paired with, probably, besides maybe USC last year, as far as talent-wise. So you saw that in this game come through a little bit. I don't necessarily think this was on LSU's offense, why they lost this game. It's absolutely on LSU's defense. LSU came out and did one thing yesterday. They played 2-man the entire game with corners who were clearly gassed. Now, Derek Stingley, All-American, future All-American corner for LSU, had an illness, a non-COVID illness Friday night, and did not play in this game. They said during the broadcast it was like an allergic reaction, perhaps. So we hope all good health, Derek Stingley. We hope he gets back. LSU came out and played 2-man with a lack of depth and or experience at corner that was absolutely exposed. They looked tired. They looked gassed. if you look at a lot of those snaps, it's lazy turns, it's tired man turns and man coverage, it's tired pursuit. They were not ready for 60 passing plays to be run against them in that secondary yesterday, and I think that's clear.
Was there anything that Bo Pelini could have drilled up differently that would have prevented this problem, understanding that Derek Stingley was not going to be there?
I don't know. I kind of understand why. I kind of understand why Bo Pelini would say, we don't have our hoss out there. We are going to play a cover 2 shell behind the two safeties high to protect those corners. And then they did. I mean, and it didn't work. They didn't protect the corners. I don't know. I'm not sure what Bo could have done, but Bo could have and should have probably switched it up a little bit. I don't know. It was ugly yesterday for LSU, but I don't think it's going to be that ugly again. Now, look, you get 2 turnovers, one of them being a pick 6, and 5 sacks. It's not like all of it was awful for LSU on defense, but enough of it was to lose that game.
A lot of people are very happy in Starkville, Mississippi today and its associated communities. Do you want to ruin some Sunday mornings? Do your best? Do you want to pump any brakes here? Is there anything that any red flags at all that come up in this performance from Mississippi State?
I don't think necessarily red flags. I mean, the turnovers were not great, but I'd like to see it against a different team. I'd like to see it against another team do this again. I'm not saying they can't. We know that the air raid, this is what they do. And if this is what they're going to do, particularly with Kylan Hill as a really, really good running back, if this is how they're going to use him, the wheel route TD was exceptional. And that is an example of a tired defense chasing, by the way. And a defense that is not communicating effectively in how they passed off the motion on that play before the wheel hit. Let's see it again from Mississippi State. Early returns, exceptional. We love it. Early returns also in Oxford for my Gators. Gators win 51-35. A lot of offense in that game. Ole Miss, to their credit, really good on offense too. Elijah Moore, really good yesterday. I think Florida, you saw Florida's diversity of attack. I think Dan Mullen is at his best in that he has retrofitted this offense with disparate parts and a diverse attack. There's a lot of guys that do different things. Kadarius Toney does something different. Javon Grimes does something different. Kyle Pitts, we know, does something different. 4 touchdowns on the day, 6 total for Kyle Trask. Kyle Trask looked really good yesterday. Really, really, really good yesterday. But I do think that Ole Miss secondary is going to make a lot of quarterbacks look really, really good. That was ugly. Across the SEC East, on the other side, speaking of ugly, the Georgia Bulldogs. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
They won by a lot.
They covered.
They covered.
For some of us.
They covered for some of us. I did not. That was not a vested interest for me. But they did cover. Whoa, Nelly, was that bad? Kirby, I believe, said before the game they knew Dwan Mathis was going to start like a week and a half ago, and I guess Dwan Mathis has been taking the bulk of the reps with the ones. Dude, they did not look ready to play in the first half of that football. On offense, they did not look ready to play in the first half of that football game. I mean, they should have won that game by 50 if you look at how Arkansas played on offense themselves.
They've got some issues. I don't think they're a ton different than Georgia's typical issues, but let's give credit where it is due.
That's the problem. That's the problem.
It's not
different than Georgia's typical issues.
But
we spent the last 9 months thinking they're going to change things up.
I'm going to give a little credit where it is due to Stetson Bennett, who is 5'10".
The law firm.
And I do not the law firm. I don't think Georgia really has a dream scenario that involves him playing quarterback for them. But he was legitimately fine.
Dwan Mathis pulled in the second quarter of that game in favor of Stetson Bennett the fourth.
Yes.
JT Daniels dressed out but was not medically cleared before the game to play. He's got a knee issue that he had at USC before he transferred over. So we will see if he gets cleared for next Saturday against Auburn.
It's going to be interesting because JT Daniels has the recruiting background that you would want. He was a consensus 5-star recruit. He seems to have quite a bit of talent, but it does seem like Georgia, for this season to be what they want it to be, is relying on the ligaments and the good health of someone who has not really been healthy in a year. and who has not played anything resembling a full season in 2 years. So we're going to see. I don't think that a lot of people in Georgia feel tremendous today on Sunday as we record this, but fortunately the Falcons play later, so they'll probably feel a lot better by the time this podcast comes out.
He knocks it out of the park.
Elsewhere in the SEC East, Tennessee played South Carolina. Tennessee was a 3-point favorite and won by 4. They might be good, fine. I don't really have. They might be good. We'll see. Right. I don't really have profound Tennessee observations through one game because it was about what we expected. I do want to spotlight LOL at the Will Muschamp field goal with 3.5 minutes left. It's 4th and 12.
A lot of weird special teams in that game.
A lot of weird ones, and this was not even the last bit of weirdness, but 4th and 12 at Tennessee's 28. He kicks a 46-yard field goal to go from a touchdown down to, drumroll, still a touchdown down because you're not going to get 2 safeties in the last 3 minutes. There really should have been someone on staff to tell him not to do this. It is madness that there was nobody there to tell him that. You still need a touchdown no matter what. 4th and 12 is not great, admittedly, but you are at Tennessee's 28. And if you trust your defense enough to get you the ball back after you kick the field goal, shouldn't you, by definition, trust them with better field position if you go for the first down and don't get it? Just madness. His buyout is huge. I'm sorry, South Carolina fans. That's ridiculous. Anyway, they make the kick. They go down 4. They get the stop, and someone runs into the punt, and it's recovered by Tennessee. So congrats to Tennessee on being 1-0, and again, apologies to South Carolina fans.
Richard,
any observations here with Tennessee for you?
No, I am moving on, buddy. I'm moving on from this game. Tennessee does have the longest win streak of any Power 5 team, not Notre Dame. I will say that. So, congratulations to the Vols. You have that. All right, let's move to the Americans. Speaking of America, Army loses 24-10 to Cincinnati, I should say. Alex, you apparently watched this game. I did not watch this game. This game happened in anonymity for me.
I watched a bit of it. It was probably not even as close as 24-10. Absent a defensive touchdown on Cincinnati's first series of the game, it would have been 24-3. Army's only touchdown was Desmond Ridder rolls out, tries to pitch it, and the pitch basically gets intercepted and run back for an easy touchdown. Very silly, kind of a video game mistake. Cincinnati's defense is fierce. They entered 19th in SP Plus on defense. They held Army to 3 points as a defense. They were not bothered at all by the triple option. Army ran for about 4 yards a carry, which is well under what its season average is going to be in any given year. A little worried about Cincinnati's running game. Army somewhat knew what was coming by the end of this game, but Cincinnati still averages 2 yards per carry, with sacks not really a significant factor in that at all. Army's run defense is not the serious thing about Army. You know, you don't really want to get your running game shut down by them. They're not very big, and it's not really a great sign that they couldn't run on them. But nonetheless, Cincinnati is definitely serious. This is a team that's probably going to be favored by a touchdown-ish in every game they play the rest of the way, except for UCF, which is scheduled for now to be in Week 12. And there's a pretty good chance that that is for the Group of Fives, not only New Year's 6 slot, but maybe their best shot yet at a playoff berth if things are weird enough. Or
I mean, that's what the third year in a row that game stakes.
Pretty big.
Will have legitimate stakes.
I mean, UCF Memphis has tended to be the one right in the Group of 5, but UCF Cincy had some stakes last year, and I think it'll be big again. UCF, by the way, continues to be UCF. They put a very big hurting on East Carolina, 51-28. ECU had a very nice backdoor cover of 25.5 for some of us. But the game was not even that close. UCF had 19 penalties for 139 yards.
Wow.
Some of which seem to be quite dubious. They've got some great receivers there. Marlon Williams, one of the best in the country, 13 for 136 yesterday. Richard, in our show notes, I just have for Texas FFS, which means for you-know-what's sake. Do you have anything to say about the Texas Longhorns needing overtime to beat a team that almost lost to Houston Baptist, which has a CVS instead of bleachers on half of its stadium?
I will say this. I actually, to my shame, when they went down to 14, I went outside to grab something and then got back in, and Texas was about to tie the game 15 minutes later. I was like, what? So I don't know. Texas avoided a loss in this game to a Texas Tech team that I don't think either of us really understand, which means I don't really understand this Texas team either. 63-56 is a legitimate basketball score, so the Big 12 is back. The other thing that tells us the Big 12 is back is that Oklahoma lost to Kansas State, which they did 38-35 at home. They blew a 21-point lead in the second half very quickly, by the way. It was art in the way that they blew that lead. You wrote this note in our show notes that says, what do we think of Spencer Rattler now? My answer to that question is that he is still very good, and I don't think they lost this game because of him. One of those interceptions, he threw 3 interceptions yesterday. Not great. One of them was a tip drill. The other 2 were legitimately on him, particularly the last one, which is a really bad throw. But Oklahoma did not give Spencer any help in the running game. And privately, I wonder if Oklahoma is searching right now for an effective, consistent run game without a quarterback that can run well, thus giving them advantages in the numbers game and with the defensive gap discipline and all that sort of stuff. Run fits the good stuff. I wonder if they're still searching there. They were not good running the ball yesterday. Negative 0.353 EPA, expected points added. Extrapolate that over the course of a game over the 35 snaps that Oklahoma had, and that's negative 12 expected points added by Oklahoma's rushing offense. They are, in a very literal analytical sense, shaving points off of their expected total of points in that game. Go ahead, Alex.
Are you worried? I'm curious. I mean, giving up 38 to Kansas State is the kind of thing that Oklahoma would do, but does it change your perception of this Alex Grinch defense in terms of its degree of improvement this year?
Not all the way. I think it was a soft 38.
Yeah.
If that's doable. I mean, Kansas State went 2 of 11 on third down. It's not like they were absolutely gangbusters. I will say down 35-14. Kansas State popped the really big deep play on the left side to, I believe, Deuce. It was a really bad bust from Oklahoma's defense. I will give them that. And that helped them begin to come out of that 21-point hole in the span of 10 plays. Kansas State scored 14 points. One drive, Oklahoma forgets how to cover. The next drive, Oklahoma forgets how to tackle. The penalties at the end, Oklahoma in the late third, fourth quarter, switched off, forgot how to play football type stuff. 10 penalties in the game. 6 of them came in the fourth quarter. 3 of them came on one drive. Oklahoma comes out in punt formation and it takes a delay of game. It looks like they're sort of not really sure how to defend the punt. They come back out after the penalty. Kansas State's showing a different block look. Oklahoma runs the play. The snaps drifts the punter a little bit off to his right, and it invites the protection to come down Main Street, and the kick gets blocked. Kansas State got this done differently than last year. Last year, Kansas State beat Oklahoma. I mean, they were beating Oklahoma. This year, they sort of snuck around the chicken coop and stole this one, so to speak.
I respect Kansas State's strategy, I have to say, and I've talked about this a bit before, of building their program by simply hiring the coach from the greatest dynasty in college football history. I think it was a good idea. Chris Klieman is really good at this. I pointed this out on Twitter, and someone asked, then how do you explain losing to Arkansas State? And my thought there is, look, this is still Kansas State, and this is what Kansas State is almost all the time. You're going to lose some games you should win. That is going to be the cost of doing business. It does make it all the more impressive that those peak Snyder teams in the late 90s really did not have games like this, and when they lost, it was to a good Nebraska or A&M or some bowl game. But Kansas State has developed, obviously they've developed an ability to get Oklahoma, but they've found an offense that works for them. And Skylar Thompson is a good quarterback. I think his production is largely aided by a lot of RPOs and play actions, but that still counts. And I'm impressed by them enough that I'm wondering, and I'm curious for your view on this, if the Big 12 is open for someone this year other than the Big 2 schools to make it to the title game. The thing is, you would think every year, right? At this point, and it didn't work out this way last year because Baylor was there, that your default assumption should be that Oklahoma will play Texas in that game because of their recruiting advantages and everybody else. But I don't really feel I would still be quite shocked if Oklahoma didn't somehow find its way to that game. But is like an Oklahoma State or a Baylor or maybe a Kansas State or conceivably, but probably not, a West Virginia, any chance of finding their way there? Maybe even Iowa State?
I don't know. And I think it's fair to say that we don't know what we don't know. I think we need to let this Big 12 season sort of play out and see how, kind of come back to that in 3 or 4 weeks. See how things played out. Baylor looked good yesterday, took care of business against Kansas. Sorry, I'm pulling up the finals. So 47-14 over Kansas yesterday. Oklahoma State sort of outlasts West Virginia. That wasn't sexy. Neither of Oklahoma State's wins have been sexy this year, but Oklahoma State wins 27-13. I think West Virginia couldn't really ever get it figured out yesterday. Every time I looked up at that game, Oklahoma State was having a chunk gain, and West Virginia was not putting the ball into the end zone. I don't know. West Virginia, I'm not going to sit here and say West Virginia is a mess, but I think Oklahoma State is a team that maybe we need to pay a little bit closer attention because more than anything, I think Oklahoma State is winning games in a different way than you would expect a Mike Gundy team. Like, oh, you think Mike Gundy throw the ball across the yard a million times, et cetera, et cetera. They're not winning games that way. They are winning differently, and I think it's good to see. The big game of the night last night was Miami and Florida State. And Miami, my goodness, did they wallop Florida State. That game was, I believe, 38-3 at halftime. Miami ends up winning 52-10. I was trying to be charitable last night on Twitter. I tweeted that Florida State is late stage Bobby Bowden bad. And Florida State, people know me. People know where I went to school. And every Florida State fan is like, no, it's worse. And inclined to agree for one big reason. Florida State's got a bigger problem than I think we recognize in perception within the state, because besides 2013, I'm not quite sure in Florida's modern era, so 1980 roughly till now, that one of the big three, Florida State, Florida, and Miami, has been bad while the other two were legit good. And I think we both think Florida and Miami are good and could potentially end up being elite. Florida State's 0-6 in the last 6 games against Florida and Miami, and the last 2 against Florida have been absolute blowouts. And obviously we saw what happened last night. I know Mike Norvell was on the sideline, but they've had 2 weeks, and they came out and looked horrible last night from the jump.
Did not look good.
Pay attention to it. It was not great for Florida State, and I don't know. I think they could be in serious trouble. And I think what you're seeing now, I don't know if it's going to last a decade, but I've seen what happens when a really good team in Florida has some sort of kind of decay within the program, and then the next guy has to clean it up and doesn't clean it up effectively. That's literally what happened at Florida State. Jimbo did not leave the cupboard terribly stocked. Willie was not able to clean things up. Now they're on the third coach number 3, and all right, Mike Norvell, you got a job on your hands here. Let's move to your boys, Alex. Pitt. Pitt is it, aren't they?
Pitt's defense is certainly it. Pitt beats Louisville yesterday on Saturday, 23-20. Pitt finishes the day with 17 sacks on the season. Nobody else in FBS has more than 11.
They are good. That front is serious.
Yeah, they are very serious. And Rashad Weaver, who was hurt last year, is one of the great defensive ends in the country. The entire front.
Elijah Cansey, that boy, even good.
And the amazing thing is that Pitt is missing their best defensive tackle, Jalen Twyman, who opted out for the year, and it just has not mattered because they are just so ferocious. The secondary is great too. The big matchup yesterday, the one that I was really looking forward to watching, was Damar Hamlin, who's Pitt's slot corner, against Tutu Atwell, the great slot receiver for Louisville. Atwell winds up catching 4 of 10 targets for 37 yards. A couple of generally not even targeted when Hamlin was covering him. One was a touchdown and what seemed kind of like a bust, but Pitt's secondary is almost as good as Pitt's front, and Pitt is 3-0. I think with a pretty good chance of getting to 5-0, though those are famous last words when talking about Pitt. They play NC State, which is very, very bad.
Boston, that was tough last night. They got
College,
absolutely whipped by Virginia Tech 45-24.
It was ugly. They got whipped by a Virginia Tech that was missing 20-some players and their defensive coordinator. And just got whipped. It was not pretty. And they also play Boston College, which we talked about the other day. I think a developing story with Boston College, but still probably a little bit shy of good. They struggled and finally beat Texas State just before the buzzer last night. But I think Pitt's offense is probably not good enough from what we've seen so far to beat like Miami or Notre Dame. I would need to see more before I would feel comfortable with Pitt in those games. And I do not think anyone should expect Pitt to do much to Clemson. But this could theoretically wind up being like a 9-2 team or an 8-3 team if things break right, and that would put them in a pretty good bowl game. On the Louisville side of the ledger, I was optimistic about this team. I do not think they are there yet, and particularly not with Malik Cunningham. We're wishing the best for his health. He got hurt in what appeared to be a pretty serious way at the end of this game. I still like Scott Satterfield. I still see a bright future, but I think Louisville is in need of some more time.
Louisville, when Javion Hawkins is not in the game, they have some pretty deep-seated issues with protecting the passer. They have not found a Mekhi Becton replacement on the left side of that offensive line. And when they do 6-man protection, 5 offensive linemen and a running back, that's not Javion Hawkins, they struggle to protect the quarterback. Now, Pitt is going to do what it did yesterday to a lot of teams on the schedule this year because that front is so good. But it also was not good by Louisville either on the other side. All right, we got about 4 minutes left. Let's run through the G5 as well. Our boys at Tulane, 66-24 over Southern Miss, absolutely rocked the socks off the Golden Eagles. That's what we like to see. They covered, I believe, 12 times over. Interesting.
Many times. They covered many times, yes.
Louisiana earned the Louisiana, Alex, I'm sorry to say, yesterday.
They did. They are not ULL this week. They are Louisiana, 2018 over Georgia Southern. A lot of kickers yesterday on Saturday flushed some very difficult kicks. Louisiana wins on a 53-yarder by Nate Snyder that would have been good from damn near 60 at the end of the day.
And he hit a 59-yarder like 2 weeks ago.
Yep, I think that maybe the kickers, they just kind of can practice their craft on their own and they don't need teammate practice the same way others do. So maybe the pandemic was better to them than most. I
actually may be having a newsletter coming on Moon Crew LLC this week about why that's not exactly true.
Ooh, well, I'm excited to see that. We'll talk about Moon Crew LLC shortly. I'm not sure that Louisiana is actually that good, but also I'm not sure that they are not going 11-0. They are going to be pretty big favorites in most of their remaining games, UAB and App State being the ones that are a little bit less certain. Some team is going to pay an irresponsible buyout and fire a coach and try to hire Billy Napier this year. I'm just saying, because college football never relaxes, although maybe, just maybe, given the budgetary situation right now, it will. Richard, who is the most enjoyable 1-3 team in college football right now?
Your Texas State Bobcats. Go Bobcats.
Absolutely. Almost beat Boston College, did not, but nonetheless, as we've talked about on this program before, they are fun. UTEP played ULM the other day, just while we keep this whip round moving at rapid speed. Let me tell you, ULM made a decisive statement by losing 31-6 that they are the worst team in FBS, pending the arrival of the UMass Minutemen.
Do they play? They don't play Middle Tennessee, do they?
I'm not sure. I kind of hope not.
I think it is really a Spider-Man pointing at meme between Monroe, Middle, and
UMass isn't even in the pool yet.
And UMass, sorry,
they're not even in the pool yet. They're just kind of getting a tan off by the off on the nice chairs out on the side of the pool. I need to talk about this before we plug some things and get out of here in 30 minutes. The ending of Iowa State TCU yesterday, incredible, and not in a good way.
Please,
TCU is trailing by 9.
You have 1 minute.
They are trailing by 9 on the last drive of the game. They'd fallen behind with Matthew Downing at QB. Max Duggan comes in. I think he should be the guy at quarterback for them. But they're losing. They're losing by 9 points. They're trying to, maybe score and then have an onside miracle. They take 2 penalties with runoffs associated on the last drive because they could not spike the ball properly. One was a fumbled snap that became intentional grounding with the spike. The other was a false start. They hit a Hail Mary at the buzzer to go down from there. It's a 9-point deficit. It becomes a 3-point deficit. And then time has expired.
This got your goat yesterday.
I had TCU at +3. A lot of people had TCU at +2.5, which was much worse. Gary Patterson declines to pick to kick the PAT. I guess he does not want his special teams unit to get experience. That is a push or a cover for Iowa State. A strong candidate for the worst beat of the year, and it is already done in week 4. That's about it. Richard, word on the street is that you are going to be on a certain television program starting perhaps Monday night this week.
Indeed. As the buzzer goes off on our 30 minutes before we get out of here, I got some stuff to plug. Me and Spencer Hall are going to be debuting on Thinking Out Loud Monday nights, SEC Network, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. It's the two of us. It's Brandon Boykin, who used to play at Georgia, and Alyssa Lang, sideline reporter extraordinaire, SEC Network superstar extraordinaire. She's on like 4 shows. I don't know how she does it. Really, really incredible, and I'm really excited. I cannot wait to do the show. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think maybe later this week we may be talking about what it's like to do television in a pandemic. So that's what we like to call foreshadowing for the kids. But yeah, I'm excited for it. I hope everybody tunes in. It's going to be fun. Hopefully.
Definitely tune in. It's going to be great. Also, make sure that you're subscribed to mooncrew.substack.com. That's our newsletter. It's a lot of fun, and it is entirely free. And we'd love to have you in Discord at patreon.com/mooncrew, where we do sort of what we do on this podcast, but in a more personal kind of, one-to-one, directly communicating way by talking about college football or whatever else. It's a lot of fun. We'd love to have you. Thank you so much for listening to Split Zone Duo, and we're looking forward to keeping this thing going.
Yeah, and I will say this for the Discord. Shout out to Split Zone Duo channel user Raul, because he's the one who put it in my head that this is the first time since the mid-'80s where both Miami and UF are head and shoulders above Florida State. I sort of looked into that yesterday and this morning and extrapolated it to it's not just that. It is what I was talking about a little bit earlier. So yeah, come hop in the Discord, holler at us. Alex, I will holler at you later this week.